are there some people who just have more stem cells than others? Are there some people who are able to release their stem cells more efficiently than others? And do some of us just have more stem cells than other people? Like even with the visible signs of aging, you'll see people who look a lot older than their years. It could have to do, of course, with their lifestyle, of course, but all that aside, how is it that, like, I guess, what's the importance of the release of the stem cells and maybe your own personal bank of stem cells? Does it vary?
Yes. There were a number of questions.
There's a million questions in there. Sorry.
Let me sort of tell it a little bit like a story.
Okay.
So when you're born, all your bone marrow is red marrow.
Yeah.
And red marrow is what makes stem cells. As you age, the red marrow slowly transforms into fatty marrow or yellow marrow that does not make stem cells. That transformation starts in the middle of your long bones and moves slowly toward the ends of your long bones, so that by age, let's say 15, you already have lost most of your red marrow into the shaft of the bones. You're still left with with red marrow into the heads of the bones. When you move, let's say, to 25 to 30 years old, you have lost about 95% of your red marrow. So you're left with very little red marrow making stem cells. It's a natural process. Okay? But the reality of this is that we all know that kids repair very easily.
Yes.
And one thing that you realize when you cross 30, then slowly you get your first injury, and then you realize, gee, this is not healing as fast as it used to. Mm-hmm. You've got a very sharp decrease in the number of stem cells, your stem cell bank, if you want.
Okay.
But whatever is left of that red marrow produces stem cells at the same rate. I don't know. I don't know any data about the rate at which the bone marrow itself releases stem cells and how that can change over time. But definitely the amount of red marrow that is available to release stem cells, that reduces with time. So it is, we can come to that later, but it is, I believe, one of the, I could not say the only one, but definitely one of the core reason why we develop so-called age-related diseases. Mm-hmm. We lose our ability to repair as we age. Now, if you take any individual of the same age, let's say you take 10 people of the same age, you may have to take more than 10 to get the data that I'm going to talk about, but let's say you take many. Yeah. And then we have seen in the lab a variation that can go from something like 0.05 stem cells per microliter to 5 stem cells per microliter. This is like a 100-fold difference. So you get your red blood cells, and the window between being too low and being too high is fairly narrow. Most of your blood parameters are in a relatively narrow range. Your stem cells are in a vast, roughly 100-fold range. So the idea here is that the people who naturally are at the higher end of that range are the people who around you repair faster, they look healthier, they're more active, the time does not seem to touch them in the same way. And the people who seem to be more affected, don't repair very well, they're the people who are at the lower end of the number of stem cells in circulation. What I cannot tell you is if the number of stem cells in circulation is due to lesser red marrow or a red marrow that does not release as many stem cells. Because in medicine, the concept is you have a poor mobilizer or a good mobilizer. And this whole concept came from cancer research, because when you had cancer prior to, let's say 1990, we had to find a compatible donor. Mm-hmm. Because you go to chemotherapy or radiation therapy, it kills all your stem cells. You need an injection of stem cells, because without stem cells, you cannot survive. Right. So we need a compatible donor. After we discovered markers on stem cells that allowed us to extract stem cells from the blood, then it was possible to extract your stem cells, freeze them, and then give them back to you after your treatment. So now it's simplified a lot of the cancer treatment, but you don't have enough stem cells in your blood to make a harvest that would be significant enough. So in order to do this, molecules were discovered that trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. You saw it in the book everywhere, because most of the studies are with that compound, GCSF. So, but in order to know if that treatment will work for you, we need to see if you are a good mobilizer. If you're not a good mobilizer, we give you the GCSF and we still cannot harvest a lot of stem cells. So it's a key aspect of a cancer treatment. Are you a good or a poor mobilizer? So that old research has revealed that there's a lot of people in society that are just poor mobilizers. And you identify them by counting how many stem cells they naturally have in their blood. If they have a low number of stem cells, you know that they're going to be a poor mobilizers. More mobilizer. So the data so far seems to tell us that the limitation is how good of a mobilizer you are. Mobilizer meaning to release. So how many stem cells can you release? Because you release them every day. When a stem cell is released from the bone marrow, it will be in the bloodstream anywhere between 6 minutes to 6 hours, with roughly about an average of, let's say, 1-2 hours. You release them, they circulate everywhere in the body. If they do not find an area where they are attracted to go and do tissue repair, they will be attracted back to the bone marrow, and they will home back to the bone marrow and resume their place in the bone marrow to be re-released later. So if you have a constant number of stem cells in your bloodstream, but they're there for, let's say, an average of 1-2 hours, that tells you they are constantly released. So it's more about how good of a mobilizer you are, and can we increase the number of stem cells that you release from your bone marrow to make more stem cell available for tissue repair and tissue maintenance. And that's really the field that I've worked in for the past 20 years.
That's so interesting. So, okay, so there's a couple of things here that are really interesting to me. So number one, when you release a stem cell, if it doesn't get used, it's not lost. It goes back into storage. That's super interesting. Number two, so different people are able to release stem cells more efficiently. Do you think that also some people have more red marrow left than others naturally? Do we know that? Is anybody like, is that a thing, or just not, we just don't know that at this point?
I don't think that we know that. The amount of red marrow is an element to quantify, mostly when we talk about a form of leukemia. That is, interestingly enough, and that's, we're getting into like a very nebulous topic here, but because I've looked into this, I thought, gee, could we reverse the fatty marrow back into red marrow?
Yeah.
So that, I mean, it's a fascinating question. But right now, this process, it is called reconversion, because first there's conversion to yellow marrow. So now reconversion is actually a phenomenon associated with a form of leukemia. So in order to be able, if we find a plant, let's say, that would support reconversion, it would require tons of research to make sure that we're actually not going to provoke something that could be deleterious to the body. Right. We don't know. So it's such a big field, if you want, that I have never really embarked on that journey. But to me, it's a fascinating question.
Yeah, it's a really crazy.
So everywhere I come across the quantification of red marrow, it's within the context of that disease process. Right. I don't think it's known or it has been really looked at for anybody and as it relates to general health.